It's kind of staggering when you think about it. The sheer amount of film shot during World War II, apparently, if you tried to watch it all back to back from all sides, it could take years, literally years of footage.
It really just put the scale of that war and the massive effort to document it into perspective.
Right. So today on Seeking History, we're really going to dig into that, how photography and film weren't just recording World War II, but actively shaping how we understand it, especially looking at the British and American side of things.
Exactly. We'll touch on quite a bit, like why positive images were so desperately needed early on, the actual camera tech they were using, which had its own problems.
Oh, yeah.
The huge dangers the combat cameramen faced, how propaganda and censorship played a role, and, the legacy of it all, how we remember the war because of these images.
Okay, so let's start maybe back in, late 1941. Things weren't looking great for Britain at that point.
No, not at all. You had the evacuation from Greece, Crete had fallen, setbacks in Libya. Morale back home was, pretty low, understandably.
And the government, the War Office, they knew this. They saw the need for a better story, essentially.
There was definitely a growing worry about how the Army was being perceived. P.J. Grigg, at the War Office, he actually flagged this up to the Army Council. People were questioning the command, the fighting ability. The narrative wasn't positive.
And that's where the idea of a dedicated film unit came in.
Yeah.
To help shape that narrative.
Precisely. They recognized the power of film, the power of images. So the Army Film and Photographic Unit, the AFPU, was officially formed. It started in Cairo, late 41.
With specific people tabbed for the job.
Yeah, Derek Knight and Harry Rignold, guys with film backgrounds, were sort of earmarked early on to get this combat filming off the ground.
Interesting. And they weren't just shooting film, they were writing stuff down, too. These dope sheets.
Yes. The dope sheets or secret caption sheets, you have to imagine these guys are filming in chaos, maybe miles from anywhere an editor might be. So they'd write detailed notes right after filming what was happening in the shot, the context, who was who, absolutely vital for the editors back in London trying to piece it all together later for newsreels or documentaries.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so what were they actually filming with? It couldn't have been easy getting cameras out there.
Oh, it was a huge challenge initially, just getting enough sign cameras for the AFPU. Britain tried to ramp up production of its own camera, the auto kind. But it was apparently quite complex, almost like hand-built inside, just not suited for quick mass production needed in wartime.
So they look elsewhere to the U.S.
Exactly. Early on, they leaned heavily on American cameras. There just weren't really suitable British alternatives available in the numbers required. The Bell & Howell IMO was a favorite.
Why that one?
It was pretty light, compact, had this useful pistol grip, made handheld shooting easier, which you definitely needed. One cameraman called it a very good camera for the type of work we were doing. Simple as that.
But then America enters the war. That must have changed the supply situation.
It did, absolutely. Once the U.S. was in, American camera makers like Bell & Howell, Mitchell too, they obviously prioritized their own military's needs.
Naturally.
Which meant the AFPU had to shift. They ended up relying a lot on cameras from the DeVry Corporation out of Chicago.
The DeVry. I feel like I've heard that name.
Yeah, maybe not as famous now, but it became the real workhorse for the AFPU. It had been around since the 1920s, actually. Won an Academy Award for filming Bird's South Pole trip in 1928.
Wow, okay.
And newsreel guys used a DeVry to film the USS Panay attack in 1937, so it had a history.
But it wasn't perfect for combat conditions, I take it.
Definitely had drawbacks.
Yeah.
Unlike, say, the German Aeroflex, the DeVry didn't use film magazines.
Speaking.
Meaning every time you changed the film roll, which wasn't that long, maybe a couple of minutes of footage, the camera's guts, the mechanism, was wide open.
Exposed to sand, dust, mud, all the stuff you find on a battlefield.
Exactly, especially in North Africa. They said it was okay for daylight loading, but cameramen often had to waste film just starting a new roll to be safe. And the result? Lots of scratched footage, out-of-focus shots. A nightmare for the editors.
I can imagine. There's one report, wasn't there, about footage being almost unwatchable because of scratches and dust.
Yeah, from North Africa. Said the picture was almost invisible. It really gives you a sense of what they were up against, not just the enemy, but their own gear sometimes.
It really does. And speaking of the enemy, these guys were putting themselves right in the line of fire constantly.
Unbelievably dangerous. Machine guns, mortars, shelling, aircraft. Concealment wasn't just tactics, it was survival.
And trying to film something that makes sense in all that chaos.
Almost impossible sometimes. John Wernham, one of the cameramen, famously asked, what's the use of photographing a rifle poking out from behind a tree? How do you capture the story of a battle like that?
Right. And night operations must have been a write-off for filming.
Pretty much. Reginald Day mentioned that. Very limited opportunities. The danger was just immense. David MacDonald was told flat out in Egypt, don't get killed, there's no point, you can't be replaced.
That really hammers it home. Their skills were valuable, irreplaceable even.
And yet, some took incredible risks. Billy Jordan got wounded by a grenade filming in Tunis.
Jeez.
And then there's Martin Wilson, apparently found playing a piano, an abandoned piano, during a tank battle near Bizerta. Someone watching called him a madman. Just a surreal moment.
Wow. A mix of incredible bravery and, well, maybe what looks like madness from the outside.
Huh.
But alongside that drive to get the shot, they must have felt a responsibility to the soldiers around them.
Oh, hugely. Many felt a strong moral duty not to put the troops in more danger. George Law said soldiers got wary if they felt a camera crew was drawing fire, making them a target. And Kenneth Rodwell put it bluntly, stand up with a camera when muck is flying around, you're a damn fool and a danger to everyone else. They had to constantly weigh getting the footage against the safety of the guys they were filming alongside.
That tension, documenting reality versus not becoming a liability, it leads right into the whole issue of staging, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because not everything could be captured authentically in the heat of the moment.
No, absolutely not. And there was pressure, especially after early defeats, to show success. Trainee cameramen at Pinewood were even given specific story examples to look for, capturing a city falling high-ranking prisoners.
So using visuals to build a narrative of progress.
Exactly. Using wrecked enemy tanks, lines of prisoners, even enemy dead sometimes. These became visual cues for we're winning. There's evident scenes were sometimes, arranged or reenacted slightly to get that desired shot, that message across.
How did that sit with things like the Geneva Convention, especially filming prisoners or the dead? Were there rules?
Well, the 1929 Geneva Convention did say prisoners should be protected from public curiosity, but in practice, during the war, filming captured soldiers was pretty common, actually, on all sides.
Really?
Yeah. Within the AFPU, it seems prisoners were often seen as readily available, saleable material for newsreels, easy visuals. Peter Hopkinson, one cameraman, noted prisoners could not object to a camera in their face, though other accounts maybe suggest it wasn't always quite that simple.
It's a complicated ethical area. So the needs of propaganda versus maybe the letter of international law at the time. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. The Americans and D-Day. John Ford comes into the picture here.
Ah, yes, John Ford, famous Hollywood director, but during the war, he headed up the U.S. government's Field Photographic Unit, part of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services.
And their job was specifically Normandy.
Yep. Documenting the whole D-Day operation from about 10 days before, right through to 4 days after the landings. Ford himself landed with the USS Plunkett.
He claimed they shot a lot of film, right? Mostly color.
He did. Later claimed millions of feet, mostly Kodachrome color film, near Colville-sur-Mer, which is near Omaha Beach. This footage was rushed back to Denham Studios outside London, round-the-clock editing, overseen by Alan Brown. They even made secret documentaries just for Allied leaders.
Millions of feet sounds ambitious. Has that claim held up?
Well, there's been some skepticism. Historians have suggested maybe Ford embellished that a bit over the years. One called the millions of feet claim probably mythological.
Oh.
And it's worth noting, Ford's unit often focused on more, let's say, utilitarian footage, less emotional storytelling, more factual, analytical stuff for military intelligence, sometimes just raw, unedited reels.
So maybe a slightly different goal than the AFP's focus on public consumption sometimes.
Perhaps, in some ways, but
Yeah.
The footage from both Ford's OSS unit and the British AFPU was crucial for a major film later on, The True Glory.
Right. The joint British-American production from 1945, Ford was involved in overseeing that, too.
He was, along with Garson Kanin and Major Hugh Stewart. It was a powerful piece, using lots of that D-Day footage. What was really innovative was how it tried to show the liberation of Europe from multiple Allied perspectives, soldiers, civilians.
How do they do that?
Using first-person narration, real combat shots, and this kind of non-linear editing, a montage style. It was quite ahead of its time for documentaries, really using film language to shape the story.
Which brings us right back to memory, doesn't it? How these films and photos don't just record history, they create our memory of it.
Absolutely. D-Day is maybe the prime example. It's one of the most filmed operations ever. But our understanding of it comes through the lens of those cameramen. Their choices, what to film, how to frame it, what got left out, constructed the narrative we largely inherit.
So when we watch that footage today, we need to be thinking about those layers, the choices made.
Exactly. Why this shot? Why this angle? What's being emphasized? And crucially, what aren't we seeing? What perspectives are missing from that visual record? It's essential critical viewing.
Thinking about the cameramen themselves again. They must have formed really tight bonds with the troops they were embedded with, sharing those dangers.
Oh, undoubtedly. Living side by side through that kind of intense experience creates incredibly strong bonds. You read accounts of them sharing everything, becoming part of the unit in a way.
And did Allied cameramen work together sometimes? Share resources?
Yeah, there are stories of that happening informally. British, American, Canadian cameramen sometimes pooling footage or helping each other out, especially in the field where resources might be scarce.
What about filming their own side's casualties? Was that allowed?
Officially, the rule was generally no photographing identifiable Allied dead, especially in an undignified way. That was mainly for morale and sensitivity reasons back home.
But it happened sometimes.
It seems it did, perhaps more for internal records or analysis, but it wasn't typically footage intended for public release. A very sensitive area.
Understandably. What other kinds of things were priorities for them to film?
Capturing new enemy weapons or tactics was high-priority direct intelligence value there. Documenting war crimes or atrocities also became a crucial grim task, especially later in the war. Their footage was vital evidence.
And just practical things, like the camera noise giving away their position.
Yes, they had to be aware of that. A warring scene camera isn't exactly subtle in a quiet, tense situation.
And then just getting the film back must have been a mission in itself.
Totally. Exposed film had to get from the front lines to processing labs, often far away. That meant hazardous journeys by jeep, plane, courier. Sometimes dedicated film dispatch riders risking their necks just to transport canisters of film.
Wow. And we get glimpses of their personal experiences through diaries and letters, too. Things that weren't censored.
Definitely. Those personal accounts often give a much more raw, uncensored view than the official reports or the edited films. They really become unofficial unit historians in many cases. Their photos and stories treasured by the soldiers, too, as a record of what they all went through together.
It's such a vital, complex role they played. Now, broadening out slightly, looking at British documentary photography overall during the war, things weren't perfectly organized from the start, were they?
No, interestingly, both the Admiralty and the Army were a bit slow off the mark in setting up official photography units right at the beginning. The AFPU, as we said, took a little while to get formally established and running properly.
And once they were running, the Ministry of Information, the Mole, kept a tight rein on things. Censorship was a big factor.
Oh, absolutely. The Mole was the gatekeeper. They controlled what photos got released to the public. There was this strange situation with the public being told not to worry about spies taking photos with the photography as usual card. While at the same time, professional press photographers face loads of restrictions, needing special red passes to work in many areas. It created friction.
A bit contradictory, yeah. So the relationship between the Mole and the press wasn't always smooth.
No, particularly with magazines like Picture Post, which liked to push the boundaries. The Mole had the final say on everything, though. They were the clearinghouse. And yes, staged photos or reconstructions were definitely used sometimes to illustrate a point or fill a gap when real footage wasn't available or suitable.
And the style of photography varied quite a bit, too. It wasn't all action shots.
Not at all. You had the gritty combat stuff, yes, but also much more sort of composed work from behind the lines. Think of Cecil Beaton's portraits and photos of the home front. Even civilian photographers like Bill Brandt, his photos of people in London bomb shelters during the Blitz. Hugely powerful contributions to the visual record.
Were there technical issues, too? British cameras versus German ones?
There were reports, yeah, that some British cameras weren't quite up to the standard of, say, the German Leica in certain respects. And censorship was ever present, photos being marked with red lines for rejection, prints being outright stopped, sometimes even retouched to remove or alter details.
So the images reaching the public were carefully curated.
Extremely carefully curated. Photography served different needs. Technical records for the military, promotional material for morale, and capturing actual events, actuality. Magazines like Illustrated and Picture Post were key in getting these approved images out there.
And some images just cut through all of that and had a lasting, shocking impact, like the photos from Belsen.
Absolutely. Those images from the liberated concentration camps bypassed a lot of the usual filters and showed a horrific reality that had a profound, enduring impact on public consciousness. They're unforgettable.
So, wrapping this up, when you think about everything we've discussed, What really stands out for you about this visual recording of World War II?
For me, it's the critical realization that these images aren't just neutral windows onto the past. They were made by people under specific, often extreme conditions, often with a purpose, whether that was boosting morale, gathering intelligence, or just trying to make sense of it all.
And the challenges they faced were immense, the danger, the technology.
Exactly. And recognizing that means we, as viewers today, trying to understand history, need to look critically. These images offer a perspective, but it's a perspective shaped by countless factors.
By choices, by limitations, by censorship, by intent.
All of it. We have to ask, what are we seeing? Why are we seeing it this way? Who made it? And crucially, what aren't we seeing? What's outside the frame? What stories didn't get told visually?
Okay, so a final thought maybe for everyone listening. How has this immense visual archive, from the raw combat film to the carefully crafted propaganda shot, how has it fundamentally shaped the way we collectively remember World War II? And considering all those layers we've talked about, what perspectives, what visual stories might still be buried in the archives waiting for us to find them and add them to our understanding? Definitely something worth thinking more about.